The motion before us is this House believes public schools should radically promote gender neutrality. Thank you to all four teams for being here. And to open debate, we call the Prime Minister. Who is So Young Yu.
Regarding the motion, the current status quo in society is that gender biases and discrimination are still prevailing in society. And by discrimination, we mean that setting specific social roles for each gender. And it often causes conflict in society. And in order to solve this problem, we would like to solve the problem by this motion. And through supporting the motion, we would like to achieve gender neutrality through education environment in public schools, and which leads to the better society in the long term without the biases or unnecessary discrimination among people. And what should be mainly discussed and handled in today's debate is about why school should be or shouldn't be an actor, and why it is so important that it should be promoted radically, and whether or not gender neutrality is needed. And we have three main arguments regarding this motion. First argument is about why we should achieve gender neutrality, and second is about why by this motion, and third is about benefits coming from supporting this motion. And I will cover our first argument, and our second speaker will cover the second and third main argument. And prior to moving on to our first argument, we would like to define some words. And gender neutrality is basically about not treating people as biologically determined or fixed. And it is the idea that policies, languages, and other social institutions should avoid distinguishing roles according to people's sex or gender. And it is for the purpose of avoiding discrimination among people. And it is also basically about equal treatment for both men and women. And also, it is important to consider both man and woman's perspective, and it is not about focusing on specific gender's rights. And also, it is important to note that it is not about diminishing biological boundary between man and woman. And also, gender neutrality in education is about not using gender definitions or pronouns, or gender-neutral pronouns, or not separating like children's toys or gender-specific sports. And for the characteristic of school, it is basically about children and education. And the school has the purpose of not only learning and teaching academic purposes or materials, but it is also about teaching social norms. And also, children are in the process of setting their own values or their own thoughts. And moving on to our first argument, it is about why we should achieve gender neutrality in society. And gender bias is basically about discrimination and society providing specific gender roles for each sex. And it is not reasonable because sex is basically inborn and not up to people. And also, people's behaviors, characteristics, or their own capabilities are really various, and there are a lot of kinds. And therefore, it is hard to put them into some fixed categories or some fixed frame of in the name of the sex. There are many parts that are not related to their biological or physical features. Therefore, we believe that we should not treat people as biologically determined or fixed. It is not about which one matches or fits more into specific roles, or it is not about whether or not which one is more inferior or which one is more superior. But basically, it is actually about their physical differences, not about which one matches more perfectly. So gender neutrality should be implemented and supported so that we can avoid unnecessary and unreasonable discrimination regarding sex and gender. And our second speaker will cover our second and third argument, and through supporting this motion, we would like to achieve gender neutrality in the long term in society and reduce any unnecessary discrimination or bias among people, which leads to the better society in the long term. Thank you.
The Prime Minister spoke for 4 minutes, 55 seconds. So we thank her very much for her speech, and we now call the Leader of the Opposition, Shiro Matsuura.
Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, today the definition the government side proposed is too soft a case. We first of all we redefine reset our definition. What is gender? What is a radical promotion of gender neutrality? For example, a radical case of gender neutrality is using the same bathroom or same locker room or the same uniform, wear the same uniform. It is such a radical promotion, and the government and after plan, the government the radical promote means the government coerce children to wear or to use such places. So this is a radical case. Then first of all let me explain our stance. Our stance is we believe the men and women is fundamentally different, and we should accept this discrepancies between the men and women. And for example, our structure, our body is different, and such a fundamental difference exists actually. So we can't achieve such a radical neutrality. This is why we oppose this motion. And then now under status quo, there is actually the problem between the men and women. There is the gap between men and women actually exists. So we should perform the affirmative action to this problem. However, this motion, this form is wrong because the radical promotion can't achieve this affirmative action, and regardless the will of children, we should after plan, regardless of the children of the will of the children, we coerce the form of gender neutrality. This is problem. We should hear the opinion, and the softer case is better. We believe so. Rather, a school fully respect the choice of themselves and prioritize their choice. This is our stance. Then let me explain. We move on to our argument. We have two arguments. In this debate, the key issue is why radical promotion won't work from opposition side. So I explain about this point. But before that, let me explain about the character of public schools. First of all, the school enrollment is education, centrally education, not the gender movement. This is the school. This the radical promotion by a school is unjustifiable. And secondly, the public school is authorized by government. So, i.e., they can't promote the feminism or anti-feminism. So, as they can't religion. For example, there is a separation of the church and the state under status quo. So this is the same in public school to this motion. So So this motion is unjustifiable to take. So secondly, let me move on to the second argument. Why the radical promotion won't work well after plan. So first of all, people can't accept such a rational policy because the people. The what is bad or what is good is depend on the people to people. It is different to people, and what is suitable is same. Therefore, we can find what is best for us, and it is without a government force choice, we can select what is best for us. So this is our fundamental stance, and so after plan, the school make their to do this or this or government dominantly, arbitrary and coercively determine you should do this, you should do this. Also, this is problematic in the democratic countries of the. For example, in the radical case of in Japan, there is a. Japan changed the law of the car accident when we hit people with our car. There is by the change of law, the punishment will be the more harsher. So then the people fear the criminal being criminalized. So people's hit and run case will increase. So this is a case of the. This is because there is a discrepancy between the government and the people actually. So this is such a radical case won't be accepted by people. And secondly, there is a backlash after plan by the children because imagine the situation before PE class we change the clothes. However, the government, I mean the schools force them to use the same locker room and use the same locker room and together to change clothes together. So after plan, so then maybe some men will delight, but some women. Say that, oh my God, why must we change our clothes with men? So school they think the school and the government is too arbitrary. So this is the two reasons why the government the radical promotion they won't accept. So for these two reasons, and in terms of the unjustifiable and unlegitimacy and unnecessity, we will very strongly oppose this motion. Thank you.
The Leader of Opposition spoke for 6 minutes, 58 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Leader of Opposition. And we now call the Deputy Prime Minister, Jang Han.
As the Deputy Prime Minister, we will not revert to the leader of the opposition because we think that their saying is we think that's not the point of this debate because they are just focusing on to the radical, but yes, as they said, that's a real problematic, but we think that's not us method, and we just as the Prime Minister wonderfully talked about how the model and how we do this motion. And Firstly, the Prime Minister say why do we achieve the gender neutrality and how this is important to our society. Our second argument, I want to talk about why we can achieve this gender neutrality by this motion. As the LO said, let's think about the public schools characteristic. The public schools are managed by the government, and there are also many public schools in our society. So it means that if we do this by passing this motion, we can affect to children, as many children as, and it will be very efficient way because it will be a very efficient way to achieve the gender neutrality. And school is a basic education organization, and as a children, they spend many times in school. So it also is the reason why this motion is efficient to promote the gender neutrality. And school, as the PM said, school can give academic knowledges and also give social norm, and the children can learn social norm and value and thinking in the school. So so public schools role is very important to children. And let's think about the children's characteristic. The children is future generation to lead the society, and they are on the step to grow up. So they have flexibility, a more flexible think than others, and they can change their think more easier than others, and they have open mind more than others. So we do this. So we promote. So we want to promote gender neutrality. So we educate. By this motion, we educate the children, not adults. And the radicality, it can be confused society. However, we think if we want to change the adults think more, then it's more confusing the society. So we think this motion is the best way in our status quo. And no, thank you. And why we do this radically? Because it's urgent. As the PM said, because we in society there are many gender discrimination, and there are also many victims because of this gender neutrality, gender discrimination. So we should solve this problem right now, and if we implement this motion, then we can reduce as many as victims in our society because of this gender discrimination. And yes.
Okay, what kind of change is the government side trying to bring when you don't change anything at all? Because what you're saying is you're just trying to change the tools and teaching, which is already done in terms of household level.
Excuse me. Okay.
What kind of change are you trying to bring when what your motion is all about what is already being done at the household level? There's no difference between the status quo.
In the household level, we think it's insufficient to promote gender neutrality, so we just want to promote more gender neutrality, so we do this way. And let's move on to our second argument. It's about the benefits if we pass this motion. Let's think about the stakeholder. First of all, individually, the victims, because the victims of gender discrimination can release their pain and be free from the unfairness. Let's think about the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is that when the women want to get higher level of their job, but they cannot do that because at the same time the men can be the higher level like CEO, but women cannot. There is a glass ceiling. But however, if we pass this motion, we can prevail in the gender neutrality, and the glass ceiling will be disappeared, and the women can be released, can be free from this unfairness. And second of all, if we pass this motion, we can provide more opportunity for both men and women. Like for example, for men, it's hard to get a job like nurse or teachers in kindergarten because there are wrong social norms like that job should be done by the woman. That's a wrong gender. That's wrong gender thinking and wrong gender discrimination. So if we do this motion, then if we prevail in this gender neutrality, we can make people get more opportunity for them, and it will be more good for them and socially. Thank you.
The Deputy Prime Minister spoke for 7 minutes, 19 seconds. Thank you very much for your speech, Madam Deputy Prime Minister. And we now call the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Kim Chae-rin.
The government side does not even understand what is in the spirit of the motion because it currently say in the motion itself that it is radically promoting. However, when we listen to their speeches, we can see there's no change occurring at all compared to the status quo. Let's go into the two cases. If it is not done in the household levels and they're making only minimum changes, we say there would be no big changes occurring in the first place. Also, secondly, if it is done in the household levels, then there is no need for the government to intervene into education's business. So we say that their policy is already done in the status quo level and there will be no change occurring at all. Also, even if we follow to their case and talk about their ideas, what they're doing is transforming the social norms, not teaching the social norms. And we say this thing of transforming and teaching should be differentiated. Moving directly on to the rebuttals, they have talked about the school is for the basic education and it is about the teaching the social norms. However, what we're saying is that education that they're promoting itself is bad. What do we mean by the social norms in the first place? It is something what the general society believes in, and it is teaching what is fit for the current society. However, if we see the status quo, we are acknowledging the difference between the man and the woman that is biologically different, and we are acknowledging some of the good characteristics of the both genders and trying to solve the troubles when it occurs about when there is a barrier that's imminent, which is why we do affirmative action. Going on to next rebuttal about the equal treatment. We currently have this affirmative action which is about acknowledging the difference and making it more convenient for the minority to survive in. For example, we have such as pregnancy breaks or period breaks in these companies. However, what their motion is doing is they are eliminating all of these factors in the first place by treating them as like all of the same dimension, the same gender itself. Lastly, Jong-ah has talked about the glass ceiling. However, firstly, there is no linkage at all about how this education will suddenly remove this glass ceiling so magically. And also, there was problem-solution mismatch because they have mentioned that employment was the problem, but they get the reasoning that institution and the society is the problem. Then we should change this institution and the society, not regarding these children at all. Now, moving on to my arguments. I'm going to talk about the three harms in today's by looking at different stakeholders. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the parents, secondly about the children, and lastly about the feminist groups. Firstly, about the parents. I think that their policy is losing the parents' right to parent their children. Because when these parents guide, what they're doing is they're trying to make the best choice for their children, for them to live beneficial and the convenient life. They're the guidance for their children. However, we say that this is infringing their best choices because firstly, we say that there would be like strong rebellion against the idea of having this gender neutrality, since then they have to follow the reasonings which is not fit in the status quo and which is too much radical. Yes, and secondly, we also say this is bad for the children itself because it is not regarding the physical difference that they have. For example, in terms of PE class, physical education class, we have lower limitations for girls because we acknowledge the physical differences that they have. However, when we remove this kind of difference limitations, like they are saying in their motion, what would happen is that this would actually give disadvantage for the woman in the first place, and the parents would not want this in the first place, which is also the components of this nation. Secondly, we say the education gap would occur between the school and the parents because parents are already taught up in a way to think differently when government is enforcing what they so-called radical actions. Also, this will lead to the secondary harm of them not sending to these schools anymore because they think it differently. And if these parents find the private space, we think that their policy would not work in the first place. Secondly, let's talk about the children, about how this prevents the individual happiness and fulfillment. Their policy is forcing these individuals to be the kind of person that their government designs to be. They're trying to make these people use the same toys, same uniforms and whatnot. And we say that even if we follow to their case, that is still enforcing certain ideas. For example, if we force them to use same toys or looks, it is also forcing the certain kind of ideologies, whether it is male or female. For example, if you force these girls to only wear the pants, you're still forcing this kind of male bias ideas in the first place. So we say that their policy is also having the harms that is in the status quo and is also worsening. Also, we say that this is lead to preventing their individual happiness and fulfillment because they cannot choose what they want in the first place. For example, if there's a girl who only likes the dolls and reading materials, well, they can't just stay as they can be in the status quo. However, following their motion, they also have to be like sporty, they also have to go to the army, and we say this kind of situation is preventing these individuals to be what they want to be and what they want to do at the end of this debate. Lastly, I want to talk about the feminist groups, which is one of the important sectors which was never brought up about the government side. We cannot divide feminist groups into two sectors of anti-feminist and pro-feminist. There are diverse gaps between these feminist groups, whether they're radical, whether they're neutral, or whether they are passive. And in this kind of cases, what the government side is doing is they're only focusing on one certain actions of very radical feminist groups and making other sectors die out. We believe that every idea should be respected, and it is upon the people's choice to decide whether they want to save this idea or make this die out. And government has no right to intervene to it. Why is this so? It returns to our stance in the first place that firstly, people find it too radical and there will be a lot of backlash and protests from happening, and we think that this is different situation from what CG would come out of example of like slavery, that everything would have backlashes in the first place because in terms of slavery, there was like 50% people agreed to this idea and they had like atmosphere of protesting. But in this kind of cases, no one argues for radical gender neutrality and no one even like cares about it. So we think it is different situation, and we say there would be bottom-up approach that people must concede to this idea first, and then have the policy match it to promote it more. So we are very proud to oppose.
The Deputy Leader of Opposition. And we now go to the closing half of the debate. We call the whip speaker, who is Kenji Tomita.
Here, here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and hello, ladies and gentlemen in this house. Today, the opening half only talks about the gender is a kind of male and women. We believe that in terms of gender, there are many kinds of groups besides male and female. For example, LGBT people or transsexual, trans male or trans female or some others. Therefore, we believe that removing the category, gender category in this society is category is very important in order to achieve society where individual people should respected as an individual. Okay. Firstly, moving on to refutation for the opening opposition. Today, opening argument from the opening opposition had 2 points. The first point is that the first week they said this plan won't work, and the second week they said the government should not intervene, should not promote any kind of particular idea. Okay, moving on. The first week they said this plan won't work, but Mr. Speaker, because they said the radical stance will some people feel wrong if we stand a radical stance. For example, they said removing.
Sir.
No, thank you. They say after taking this proposal, they say. The male and women will use same uniform or same goods. But Mr. Speaker, they confuse the biological sexuality and social gender. Social gender is totally different from this biological difference. Even after taking this proposal, we can't change the body function of the male and women. So therefore. It is totally out of the debate, we believe. The second, they say the government should not intervene because the government should not intervene because if we take this proposal, it's like a government promoting the one particular idea, refutation. The being neutral is not promoting one, forcing them to. We believe that. Being neutral in this society is not meaning that promoting one particular idea. We say, well, it's not mean. It's not mean. Does not mean.
Sir.
Okay.
Clarify your word of how LGBT's right would get guaranteed, because in our current education also they teach about LGBT.
But. Okay, right, later, please. I will talk to you later. Sorry, wait. And government. Being neutral does not mean forcing them to one particular idea. They refer the example of after taking this proposal, the parents should have the right to what is good for their children. The school should not promote any kind of idea. They say if school do, the parents' right will be increased. But it is not the issue of debate. We believe that the school are the is like the. Which means that which decide the direction of the whole society. As for there are many kinds. As for there is a variety. As for there is a variety in the society, school should be neutral in the first place. Okay, moving on to. Our argument, Mr. Speaker. Today, as a closing government, we want to introduce extension how the public should be neutral in the society. Why public authority should be neutral in the society. Mr. Speaker, the society is created in diverse. For example, there are many ethnicity in the society. There are many religion in the society. There are many varieties of kinds of gender in the society. There's so many ideologies in the society. We should respect each other in the society. Mr. Speaker, as there is a diverse in the society, the public authority should not be stand for any kind of particular ideas. The public authority should serve for everyone. If the public authority stands one particular idea, it might be persecution for others. In this debate, the school is a kind of public school is like a public authority which should not promote any idea which is priority, which takes advantage to some people, we believe. As for the gender, we believe that. As for the gender, why we should stand for radical stance is that we have a necessity of changing the society. Entire society. If we stand current status quo, it might sorry, for this reason we support this motion. Thank you very much.
The member of government spoke for 7 minutes, 19 seconds. Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Member of Government. You call the member of opposition, Tomohiro Nakano.
Now under the school, gender neutrality is gradually solving. As we can see the fact that we all have the idea that gender neutrality is good. And as a closing opposition, we also admit this point. If men can become a kindergarten teacher or women can become politicians regardless of their gender, it is a very wonderful world. But however, I cannot agree with one thing. The problem is that this plan is conducted radically. Radical extreme things ending always bad result. And we believe that this motion is also an example. Radical shift to gender neutrality would create a move against gender neutrality in people. And then many people would think that, many people would lose the idea that gender neutrality is good. A serious Japanese discriminative idea called black is a good example. Several 10 years ago, black people were discriminated. So Japanese government promoted anti-discriminative campaign. But however, black people did not support this campaign. They were opposed this campaign by saying that do not awaken asleep children. We believe that an idea that gender neutrality is bad has already fallen asleep, so we should not awaken. This is why we are proud to take this motion. And we support the current measure and promote gender neutrality gradually, not radically. So let me move on to our argument. Our first argument is that how extreme measure extreme radical measure like this plan will create opposite effect. Now, under the school, now at the school, there's some kind of sex separation in school, and we have to say that male students and female students are feeling comfortable in this separation. Although we may admit that this comfortableness is created by society. Male students feel comfortable because they don't have to do complex work like sewing, and female students feel comfortable because they do not have to play combat sports like judo or kendo. Anyway, sex separation is let students feel comfortable. Okay, this fact we cannot deny. But after taking this plan, these students are sent to uncomfortable situation. Even women have to play combat sport, and even men have to do complex work, and as a opening government says, they have to change clothes in the same locker room. Okay.
What you just say is that it's because of your discriminational thinking, already.
Yes,
How do you think?
we may admit that this comfortableness is created by society, but the fact we may admit so, but we cannot deny that men and women are feeling comfortable actually. Okay. So after taking this plan, these students are sent to uncomfortable situation, and then they have to treat with this uncomfortable situation. They have to treat with judo and sewing, and they have no room to think about its meaning, why they are sent to this uncomfortable situation. So, in other words, they cannot think about why gender neutrality is so strongly promoted. So, for them, gender neutrality has become nothing but what gives uncomfortableness. Then what happened? Many students would think that gender neutrality is not a good thing. It is very bad thing. And the problem is that this is conducted in school. What is school? School is to send students to society. If students once think that gender neutrality is a bad thing, there will be many adults thinking that gender neutrality is bad in society. This is a very bad situation. This is the very opposite of gender neutrality. And in addition, this situation is very easy to imagine because women one hand know that gender neutrality is good thing, but on the other hand, women think that they want to be protected by men. Similarly, men know that gender neutrality is a good thing, but on the other hand, they want to protect women. So once the stream of supporting gender neutrality get weak, the idea that we want to protect women or we want to be protected by men will become strong. And of course, this is the opposite of gender neutrality. So all in all, this plan do not promote gender neutrality, but actually this plan will break the common idea that gender neutrality is good, that is existing in this current societies. Let me move on to the next part. Even if the gender neutrality education was successful, there's another problem. As opening opposition said, men and women are fundamentally different. So some jobs are definitely oriented for men, and some job is definitely oriented for women. For example, men can do a work that requires power, and women can do a work that requires complex work. If if such a complete gender-neutral education is conducted in school, this will banish. This will even banish the idea that there are some things that men cannot do and there are some things that women cannot do. So this plan would even banish the what we should separate, and this will make society worse. So we are very proud to oppose for this reason. Thank you.
The member of opposition spoke for 7 minutes 35 seconds. So thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Member of Opposition. And we now call the government whip, Kim Yo-jin.
The reason why the debate become quite messy is because that the opposition bench has understood that the gender neutrality is something that they have been that has been already implemented throughout the whole society, and we see that there is no practical benefits coming from it. But we want to tell you as a government bench, and especially coming from this closing government, we want to say that their concept of comprehending gender neutrality is not that way, and we want to clarify what the gender neutrality itself is, and me as a government whip is going to tell you what has been debated upon, which is about the clash. I'm going to explain about the clash that has been debated upon throughout the whole debate. The clash that has been found in today's debate is A, that do we necessarily need and do we necessarily see the necessity of promoting gender neutrality in the radical sense, and B is about is the public school can be the active and going to be the practical source of actor to promote these kind of gender neutrality. But before before explaining about any kind of clashes that's been mentioned, we're going to clarify the idea of the concept of the gender neutrality, because they have understand that the gender neutrality is idea that when it comes to gender, they are only talking and pertaining to the idea of the distinguishing or distinction between male and female, and that have been mentioned that they are saying because we see the gender equality has been already achieved in the current status quo, we see there's no necessity no necessity of passing this motion. But we want to say that when it comes to gender, we are not only talking about idea or the category of male and female, but rather we're going to include the idea that has been already mentioned throughout the lecture, that we're not talking about the idea of the male or the dichotomy between male or female, but rather we're going to understand what kind of preference that you have as a social being. And secondly, we're going to tell you that neutrality itself is not going to say that you are fitting to the certain kind of the category that has been provided by the society, but rather we're going to understand you without any kind of the prejudice or without any kind of the category or options that we have in the current status quo. And that is the reason why we believe that the whole arguments coming from the opposition side is not standing as a valid idea, because they have mentioned that the gender equality is something that has been achieved already by saying the female CEOs or number of the people that we have, and they have said that the ideas are not going to be the practical one, because because in the household level we have that the parents are promoting the gender neutral toys and sports. We believe that those kind of argument is not going to be it's not something that should be credited, because at the very first place, that is not the idea not the idea that suits for the gender neutrality that has been kept argued by the government side. So when it comes to clashes, we're going to argue in several points. The first clash that I identified, as I said earlier, that do we necessarily need the necessity of promoting gender neutrality in radical sense, is because when it comes to gender, we're going to include the idea that there has been we're not giving the more value, or we're not going to make a hierarchy between the gender. And when it comes to the gender, we're as you have said, as our a member of the government has already mentioned, that when it comes to gender, we're not talking about the biological differences, because we already admit that there is a differences, but we're not going to make it as a value judgment, because as we have said, gender is not something that has been only pertaining to the idea of the discrimination between male and female, but rather we're going to understand as a social individual, so that they can stand as their stand as their own identity. And that is the reason why we can probably say that gender neutrality is a solution, because we're not going to make the gender roles, and we're not going to have the gender expectation coming just because of your gender, just because of your sexual differences. And that is the reason why we believe that gender equality at the status quo is not going to be the desirable solution, because even though we see the superficial level that number of female CEOs has been established, but we can tell that has been yielded another kind of the gender expectation for the men. Being gentlemen is something that has been desirable, and that has been yielded that another kind of the gender bias gender prescription has been already yielded. And because the neutrality itself is not putting much more value, or not putting the value of one over the another, we believe that having one is much more better, because at the very first place, what the Ewha's argument and the CEO's argument itself is that they have said that even though they have implemented neutral ways of like having a sport or choices, but it doesn't make sense, because they are saying in the level that we already have an answer that being fitting to the one kind of category, which is either man or female. We believe that they have said that there is a definite answer regarding that, and we are going to acknowledge there is an exception. But in the case of coming from the government side, we are telling you that there is no kind of value judgment, and we are understanding that as an individual, not understanding that as an exception. And that is the biggest differences coming from the government side. And also we can tell that coming from the ideas that this slavery and the another slavery, that we can say that there is no such thing as an absolute criteria, and that is the reason why we believe that banning the criteria and banning the categorizing itself is going to be the solution to solve. Is going to achieve the goal setting. Yeah.
About same social identity, is it already done in status quo education?
But in the what we are going to say when it comes to public school is because that when it comes to having a social identity is that as I have said earlier, that they have the definite answer that fitting to one kind of category is the desirable way. But when we are passing this motion, we can say that the person as identity and can be identity is achieved and guaranteed by the socialization, that understanding me as my individual is going to be achieved in our cases, rather than their cases that they have said that having a definite answer or being a male and being a female and being a feminine and being a masculine is the solution. We are going to tell you that you can be appreciated as yourself, not fitting to the not fitting to the unilateral categories that has been established throughout the whole society. And that is the reason why we believe that the public school is the one that actually can achieve the practical benefits, because public schools public schools are the one that influences the children's identity, because they are the very first largest group that the students can face. And secondly, that the public education done in public school is reflected upon the idea coming from the society. And that is the reason why we believe that the public school is going to be the practical actor still to end up to the goals that we have set. So throughout the whole reason, we believe that the gender neutrality is the solution that we can solve, that there is no discrimination or no distinction between others and fitting into one unilateral categories. And we believe that the public schools can be the practical actor that can solve these whole problems. And that is the reason why we believe that going for this argument is better than others. Thank you.
The government whip spoke for 7 minutes, 26 seconds. Thank you very much, Madam Whip Speaker. And we now call the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not a debate we should respect women's rights or not. Or this is also not a debate whether the discrimination in the biological way or gender way is important or not. But this is a debate. We should take a radical promoting gender neutrality right now or not. And the government side said that the gender neutrality is absolutely important, so we have to take this from right now. And the opposition side then strongly believes it's not. The gender neutrality is somehow important indeed, but we should not take this from right now, but we should leave this gender neutrality in the society. So firstly, I will explain about the rebuttal for the government side. The first problem is we can't find any problem for the government bench. Government bench just said the gender neutrality is important in our society, so we should promote the absolute gender neutrality, like saying the example of the children's toy or like other kind of job, like a nurse or kindergarten or like that. But the government side didn't propose any serious problem existing in our society. So we believe there is no necessity to take this from right now. And we say, and the government strongly believe gender neutrality is sometimes important, but sometimes is not so important in the area. For example, in the area of politics, in the past, there are a lot of the men politicians, and today there are a lot of female politicians all over the world. Like Hillary Clinton may be the next president of the United States, and Angela Merkel is the prime minister in Germany, and of course the Korean president Kim Jong-il is the first female president in the South Korea. So in this case, we can show that the people recognize the importance of the women, and people gradually importance of the women, and people recognize this importance, and people can change the society. So opposition side strongly believe that government should not radically change the situation right now. And the opposition side will also, in my speech, also explain this point. This radical change won't work, and rather than this radical change will cause serious harm in our society. Okay, let me start my speech. I will question 2 points. Firstly, what is the serious harm in this point? And the second, we will explain what kind of the harm, concrete harm happens for our society. So firstly, I will explain why the harm will happen by this radical change. Because the government plan is like that. The people recognize the gender equality, gender neutrality is important, so we should take this plan and we should realize the gender neutrality right now. Yes, people will understand we should respect the woman's rights, and people understand that the gender neutrality, we should not discriminate men, or we should not discriminate the woman. But yes, even if people understand that kind of logic is very important, but it's not easy for people to act through this ideology, because the example is like Rwanda. In the Rwanda, the Belgium separate two ethnic groups by their power, and after that, civil war happened. No, thank you. In this case, people understand that harmony is important between the ethics, but the radical change happens, and concrete harm occurs for them. And in this case, people didn't have enough time to understand what is the important thing and what is not the important thing. So as a result, civil war happens in Rwanda. So that is a concrete example that radical change will happen, the serious result. So we think in terms of the gender neutrality, people understand the gender neutrality is important. In today's society, people gradually want to change this situation, but the government policy will introduce the radical change for them, and the people can't understand. People understand this logic is important, but the concrete harm will happen to the people. Like they said, the neutrality is for the bathroom, or like the same bathroom or same changing uniform in the same place. In this case, people or especially the man will confuse. So in this case, the man will forget the important principle that the discrimination is bad and harmony is important. So the people act against the policy, and harm will happen as a result of this plan. So we think the radical change is just harmful, and so in this case, the government plan is just force. And secondly, I will explain. Okay, beyond that, yes.
We explained radical change is beneficial in this motion at the first, and there are many people because of wrong gender ideas. As a government, we have to solve this problem. It's our role. How do you think?
Yes, people will understand the gender. Some people will think that gender neutrality is important, but some people may not think the gender neutrality is important. Yes, we accept these two types of thought. But the important thing is the government won't solve the problem rather than cause the harm, as I explained before. And the second, I will explain the concrete harm will happen to our society. As my partner extended this point, it will cause some serious harm to our society. And the government side said the public school is important because the children is more flexible. It's very easy to overmind their thought. Yes, we accept this plan. So that's why we think that education for children should be carefully. And if we educate children wrongly, the result of that education will worse. The good example is North Korea. In North Korea, the children are educated that Kim something is very important. Is a king. So every people believe this is a king, and maybe it's not true. So that is why education is absolutely important. So in the government case, if we educate children that gender neutrality is absolutely important, people will accept, and after people go to the society, people notice that gender neutrality is not something important. So in this case, people have a strong anti-movement for the gender neutrality. It is a concrete harm will happen to our society. So that is our case. So, Mr. Speaker, I will explain that government plan won't solve the problem rather than cause the serious harm in our society. So their case is just false.